There is one experience that we all share. You have heard a voice that no one else can hear. It questions your decisions. It replays your mistakes. It imagines futures that may never happen. Sometimes it encourages you. Sometimes it becomes your harshest critic. It is with you when you wake up. It follows you through every conversation, every success, every failure, and every quiet moment in between. It is the reason you can remember your past, dream about your future, and wonder what your life means. It has inspired the world's greatest discoveries, works of art, and ideas. It has also been the source of anxiety, regret, loneliness, and fear. The greatest mystery may not be the universe around us. It may be the one inside our own minds. This is the tragedy of self-awareness. Welcome back to Student of the Brain. If you enjoy these types of vids, like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The moment everything changed. Life on Earth didn't begin with questions. It began with survival. For countless generations, animals did what they had always done. They searched for food, avoided danger, rested, and repeated the same patterns that had kept their species alive. Every behavior had one purpose: survive long enough to see another day. As different species evolved, their brains became more capable. They learned from experience, remembered where to find food, and recognized threats. Many formed complex social groups and solved problems in remarkable ways. Evolution wasn't standing still. With each step, brains became more sophisticated. New abilities appeared, old ones became more refined, and survival strategies grew increasingly complex. Then, in one branch of the evolutionary tree, something different began to emerge. The human brain developed the ability to do something no other species has demonstrated to the same degree. It could turn its attention inward. Instead of only observing the world, it could observe itself. A memory was no longer just a memory. It could be replayed. Tomorrow was no longer just another day. It could be imagined. A decision was no longer just made. It could be questioned. For the first time, a species could ask, "Why did I do that? What happens next?" And eventually, "Who am I?" That ability changed everything. It led to discoveries, inventions, language, and civilizations. It allowed knowledge to pass from one generation to the next. Every book ever written, every city ever built, and every scientific breakthrough began with a mind that could think beyond the present moment. But the same ability came with something new. The mind that could imagine success could also imagine failure. The mind that could remember joyful moments could also relive painful ones. The same self-awareness that helped us understand the world also forced us to understand ourselves. And once that happened, there was no going back. Chapter 2. The Mirror Within. There is a difference between being alive and knowing that you are alive. Most of us recognize ourselves without giving it a second thought. We remember our past, imagine our future, and carry a sense of identity that follows us wherever we go. It feels so natural that we rarely stop to ask how it happens. More than a century ago, psychologist William James proposed that the self has two sides. There is the I, the part of us that experiences life, and the me, the part that we can observe, evaluate, and think about. In other words, we don't simply have experiences. We can examine ourselves having those experiences. That ability changes everything. We replay conversations after they've ended. We imagine how others see us. We judge our decisions, question our beliefs, and slowly build the story we call our identity. We become both the person living our life and the person watching it unfold. Psychologist Ulrich Neisser later described self-awareness as something that develops in layers. We begin by recognizing ourselves physically, but over time we also develop a social self, a remembered self, and eventually a self that imagines the future. Our identity is not something we are born fully understanding. It is something that continues to develop throughout our lives. This idea is closely connected to the work of Jean Piaget, who observed that children gradually move from experiencing the world as it happens to thinking about their own thoughts, perspectives, and understanding. The mind doesn't simply collect information. It begins organizing that information into a picture of who we are. That may be the most remarkable part of self-awareness. It allows us to become the only species capable of examining our own minds and asking whether the person we are today is the person we want to become. The question is no longer whether we are aware. The question is whether any other species experiences awareness in the same way. Chapter 3: The Animals We Left Behind. If you have ever watched a dog wait patiently for its owner, an elephant mourn the loss of another elephant, or a chimpanzee solve a difficult problem, it becomes hard to believe that humans are completely different. We aren't. The closer scientists have looked, the more they have discovered that many animals remember, communicate, cooperate, and even display emotions that were once believed to belong only to us. Some species recognize family members after years apart. Others plan ahead, use tools, teach their young, or comfort companions in distress. Intelligence is not uniquely human. Neither is emotion. Charles Darwin argued that the difference between humans and other animals is one of degree, not kind. He believed that many of the traits we value most did not suddenly appear. They gradually developed over time. More than a century later, psychologist Gordon Gallup introduced what became known as the mirror test. When certain animals were presented with their own reflection, a few appeared to recognize that they were looking at themselves rather than another animal. Chimpanzees, orangutans, elephants, dolphins, and magpies have all shown evidence that suggests some level of self-recognition. But recognizing a reflection may only tell part of the story. Psychologist Daniel Povinelli has argued that recognizing yourself in a mirror is not the same as reflecting on your own mind. An animal may know that the image belongs to its own body without asking the kinds of questions humans ask every day. That distinction matters. A person can replay an argument from years ago and still feel embarrassed. We can imagine conversations that never happened. We can worry about decisions we haven't made yet. We can wonder how others see us, question our purpose, and think about the person we hope to become. Those abilities may represent more than self-recognition. They may represent a level of self-reflection unlike anything else we have observed. Perhaps the greatest difference between us and the animals we left behind is not that we can recognize ourselves. It is that we don't stop thinking about ourselves. Chapter 4: The Birth of the Self. No one enters the world with a finished identity. An infant can feel hunger, discomfort, warmth, and fear. But there is no clear understanding yet of being a separate person with a past, a future, or a place in the world. That sense of self has to develop. At first, experience is immediate. A child reacts to what is happening now. Over time, patterns begin to form. Familiar voices are recognized. Certain people become sources of comfort. The child starts to understand that actions have consequences and that the world continues even when something is out of sight. Jean Piaget believed that children build their understanding step by step. They do not simply receive information. They test the world, make mistakes, and slowly change the way they think. This process eventually allows a child to understand that their thoughts belong to them and that other people may see the same situation differently. The mirror becomes one of the earliest signs of that change. A very young child may treat a reflection like another person. Later, the child begins to understand that the face in the glass belongs to them. This does not mean a complete identity has formed, but it shows that the child is beginning to connect an image with their own body. Soon the self becomes social. Sociologist Charles Horton Cooley described this through the looking glass self. His idea was simple. Part of who we believe we are comes from how we imagine others see us. A child notices approval, disappointment, laughter, attention, and rejection. Those reactions begin shaping the story they tell themselves. You're smart, you're difficult, you're shy, you're funny, you're annoying. Long before we fully understand these labels, we begin carrying them. This is why the self does not form in isolation. It grows through relationships. Parents, teachers, friends, and strangers all become mirrors. Some reflect us clearly, others distort what we see. As children grow older, identity becomes more complicated. Psychologist Erik Erikson argued that adolescence brings a major struggle between identity and confusion. A young person begins asking what they believe, where they belong, and what kind of person they want to become. The question is no longer only, who am I? It becomes, who should I be? That question can stay with us for the rest of our lives. We change careers, lose relationships, become parents, grow older, and face experiences that no longer fit the person we thought we were. The self must keep adjusting. Identity is not discovered once and then preserved. It is revised whenever life forces us to see ourselves differently. This may be where self-awareness begins to show its weight. To have a self is to carry an image of who you are. It is also to notice every moment that image is challenged. The self is born slowly, through memory, relationships, judgment, and choice. And once we become aware of who we are, we also become aware of who we are not. Chapter 5. The Cost of Knowing. Self-awareness allows us to understand who we are. It also allows us to judge who we are. Once a person develops an image of themselves, life becomes a constant comparison between that image and reality. We notice the distance between what we intended and what we did, between the person we hope to become and the person we see today. Sometimes that distance motivates us. Sometimes it becomes painful. Psychologist Carl Rogers described the tension between the real self and the ideal self. The real self is who we believe we are now. The ideal self is who we think we should be. When those two versions are close, we tend to feel stable. When they drift apart, we may feel disappointed, inadequate, or lost. A person may believe they should be more successful, more confident, more disciplined, or further ahead in life. The problem is not always that their life is failing. The problem may be that reality no longer matches the image they carry in their mind. Self-awareness makes that conflict visible. It allows us to recognize our weaknesses, but it can also convince us that those weaknesses define us. The pressure grows when other people enter the picture. Psychologist Leon Festinger argued that we often understand ourselves through comparison. We look at the people around us to judge whether we are doing well, falling behind, or fitting in. Comparison can help us learn. It can show us what is possible, but it can also turn another person's success into evidence of our own failure. Comparison is a thief of joy. We compare careers, relationships, appearance, intelligence, money, families, and happiness. We see someone else's life from the outside and compare it with every private doubt we carry inside. The comparison is rarely fair. Still, it affects how we see ourselves. Self-awareness also gives us the ability to look backward. We can return to moments that ended years ago and imagine what we should have said. We can rebuild old decisions in our minds and picture better outcomes. This is where regret begins. Regret can be useful. It can teach us what to avoid and help us make different choices in the future. But regret becomes destructive when the past is no longer treated as a lesson and begins to feel like a permanent sentence. The mind asks the same questions again and again. Why did I do that? The event is over, but the judgment continues. Psychiatrist Aaron Beck studied how negative patterns of thought can shape emotion. A painful event may become more than something that happened. It can become proof that we are defective, unwanted, or incapable of change. One mistake becomes, I always fail. One rejection becomes, no one will ever want me. One period of uncertainty becomes, my life will never improve. The mind moves from judging an experience to judging the entire self. This is where guilt and shame begin to separate. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, there is something wrong with me. Guilt can lead to apology, repair, and change. Shame often pushes people toward hiding. It makes us fear that if others saw us clearly, they would confirm the worst things we already believe about ourselves. Self-awareness gives us the ability to examine our behavior. But without compassion, that examination can become punishment. We begin watching ourselves too closely. We question how we sounded, how we looked, whether we said too much, or whether everyone noticed our discomfort. A conversation lasts 10 minutes. The replay can last all night. This is one of the quiet costs of knowing ourselves. We are rarely allowed to simply experience a moment. Part of us is often standing outside it, measuring, comparing, and judging. The same ability that helps us correct our behavior can make us feel as though we are always being evaluated, even when no one else is paying attention. Self-awareness did not create every form of suffering. Pain, fear, and loss existed long before anyone could explain them. But self-awareness gave suffering a story. It allowed pain to become personal. Fear could become a prediction. Failure could become an identity. Loss could become a question with no answer. This is where the tragedy begins to take shape. To know yourself is to recognize your potential. It is also to see every way you have fallen short of it. Chapter 6. The Mind That Never Sleeps. The conversation is over. You made it home hours ago. No one else is thinking about what happened, but you still carry that moment with you. You replay every word. You imagine better answers. You wonder whether you said too much or not enough. The moment is over, yet your mind refuses to let it end. This is one of the most unusual consequences of self-awareness. The world moves on. The mind does not. Psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent much of her career studying rumination, the tendency to repeatedly think about the same thoughts, problems, or emotions without moving toward a solution. Unlike reflection, which helps us learn, rumination often traps us in a loop. We revisit the same memories, hoping for a different outcome that can never happen. The mind begins searching for answers that no longer exist. What if I had said something different? What if I had made another choice? What if everything that happened was my fault? Hours pass. Even years pass. The questions remain. Neuroscientist Marcus Rachel discovered that even when we are doing nothing at all, the brain remains remarkably active. He identified what is now known as the default mode network, a group of brain regions that becomes especially active when our attention turns inward. Instead of focusing on the outside world, the mind begins wandering through memories, imagined futures, unfinished conversations, and questions about ourselves. In many ways, doing nothing is exactly when the mind becomes busiest. This ability serves an important purpose. It allows us to plan ahead, learn from experience, solve problems before they happen, and imagine possibilities beyond the present moment. But it comes with a cost. The same system that prepares us for tomorrow can quietly steal today. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman described an important difference between the experiencing self and the remembering self. One lives in the present moment. The other constantly looks backward, organizing memories into stories that shape how we see our lives. Those two versions of ourselves don't always agree. The experiencing self may find peace in an ordinary afternoon. The remembering self may dismiss that same day because nothing extraordinary happened. Over time, we begin spending less time experiencing life and more time evaluating it. We judge whether we are productive enough, successful enough, or happy enough. We analyze conversations while they are still happening. We rehearse tomorrow before today has even ended. The mind becomes both narrator and critic. Perhaps that is why silence can feel uncomfortable. When the noise of the outside world fades, another voice often takes its place. The voice that compares. The voice that worries. The voice that reminds us of every unfinished goal and every unanswered question. For many people, the loudest conversation they will ever have is the one no one else can hear. The tragedy is not that the mind thinks. The tragedy is that the mind exists. Chapter 7. Searching for meaning. There comes a point when survival is no longer the question. Most people are no longer wondering where their next meal will come from or whether they will make it through the night. Instead, a different question begins to appear. What is all of this for? Self-awareness does more than allow us to think about ourselves. It pushes us to search for purpose. We want our lives to matter. We want our choices to mean something. We want to believe that our time here has value beyond simply existing. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl believed that this search for meaning is one of the strongest forces in human life. After enduring unimaginable suffering, he observed that people could survive extraordinary hardship when they believed there was still a reason to keep moving forward. Meaning does not erase pain. It gives pain a direction. Not everyone searches for meaning in the same place. Some find it in family. Others might find it in discovery, faith, service, creativity, or the quiet satisfaction of helping another person. The destination may differ. The search is nearly universal. Psychologist Abraham Maslow suggested that once our basic needs are met, we begin reaching for something higher. Beyond safety and security lies the desire to grow, to create, and to become the fullest version of ourselves. The climb never really ends. Each goal reached is often replaced by another. Each answer gives way to another question. Self-awareness keeps asking what comes next. Psychologist Erik Erikson believed that adulthood brings new challenges of purpose and contribution. As we grow older, many people begin asking not only what they have achieved, but what they have given to others and what will remain after they are gone. That question changes how we see success. It's built slowly through countless ordinary moments that become part of a larger story. Perhaps this is why people are drawn to stories in the first place. We naturally organize our lives into beginnings, setbacks, victories, losses, and endings. We want our experiences to fit together. We want them to make sense. Without self-awareness, that story would never exist. But neither would the question of whether we have lived it well. The search for meaning is not a problem to be solved. It is one of the consequences of knowing that our lives are limited. And perhaps that search, more than anything else, is what gives those lives their value. Chapter 8. The Burden of Being Human. At some point, every person realizes that life will end. Not because someone tells us, but because we understand it. We begin to recognize that time is limited. Birthdays no longer simply mark another year. They become quiet reminders that every year lived is also a year gone. No other realization changes the human experience quite like this one. Cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker argued that much of human behavior can be understood through our awareness of mortality. We build families, create art, pursue achievements, and leave behind stories because we know we will not be here forever. In many ways, our awareness of death shapes the way we choose to live. That awareness can inspire extraordinary things. It can also create extraordinary fear. Psychologist Irvin Yalom described this as an existential concern that follows us throughout life. We may not think about death every day, yet it quietly influences our choices, our relationships, and the questions we ask ourselves. Will I be remembered? These questions don't appear because life is ending today. They appear because we know that one day it will. This awareness changes the way we experience loss as well. When someone we love dies, we grieve their absence. We become aware of our own mortality. The future suddenly feels more fragile. The ordinary feels more valuable. Psychologist Laura Carstenson's socio-emotional selectivity theory suggests that as people become more aware that time is limited, their priorities begin to change. Many invest less energy in status and comparison and more in relationships, meaningful experiences, and the people who matter most. Time itself becomes more precious. Perhaps this is one of self-awareness's greatest contradictions. The knowledge that life is finite can fill us with fear. It can also teach us what deserves our attention. Without that awareness, there would be less urgency. The clock wouldn't matter. Yet because it matters, every moment gains weight. This is the burden of being human. But we understand the end is coming. But the remarkable part is we continue writing it anyway. Chapter 9. Can we escape ourselves? After everything we have explored, one question remains. If self-awareness can bring regret, anxiety, comparison, and fear, is there any way to escape it? For centuries, people have searched for that answer. Some have tried to silence the mind. Others have tried to outrun it. Many discover the same truth. Wherever you go, your mind goes with you. Perhaps the goal was never to eliminate self-awareness. Perhaps the goal is to change the way we relate to it. Psychologist Stephen Hayes built acceptance and commitment therapy around a simple idea. Much of our suffering comes from struggling against thoughts that naturally appear. The harder we try to force them away, the more power they often seem to gain. Instead of asking, "How do I stop thinking this?" a different question emerges. Do I have to believe every thought that enters my mind? That small shift can change everything. Thoughts are events in the mind. They are not always facts. Psychologist Albert Ellis spent decades showing that it is often our interpretation of an event rather than the event itself that shapes how we feel. Two people can experience the same setback and walk away with completely different stories because they explain it to themselves in different ways. The conversation inside our minds matters, but it is still only a conversation. Mindfulness researcher Jon Kabat-Zinn offered another perspective. Instead of living in memories or imagined futures, we can learn to notice the present moment without immediately judging it. The purpose is not to stop the mind from wandering. It is to recognize that we do not have to follow every thought wherever it leads. For the first time in this documentary, the burden begins to feel lighter. Self-awareness is not the enemy. It is a tool. Like any tool, it can build or it can harm. The same mind that creates shame can also create compassion. The same imagination that predicts failure can imagine hope. The same awareness that judges our past can help us make a different choice tomorrow. We may never silence the voice inside our heads. That was never the promise. What we can change is the relationship we have with that voice. Freedom is not found by escaping ourselves. Perhaps it is found by finally learning how to live with ourselves. Chapter 10. The Price of Self-Awareness. We began this documentary with a simple question. What happens when a species becomes aware of itself? And what's tragic about it? The answer is more complicated than it first appears. Self-awareness gave us the ability to understand the world in ways no other species has demonstrated. It gave us language, science, medicine, philosophy, and every civilization we have ever built. It allowed us to preserve knowledge, imagine the future, and ask questions that reach far beyond our own lives. But it also changed the way we experience ourselves. It gave us the ability to replay our mistakes long after they were over, to compare ourselves with people we'll never meet, to imagine futures that may never happen, to recognize that our time is limited and wonder whether we have spent it well. The same mind that writes a symphony can also write a worry. The same imagination that discovers a cure can also imagine a catastrophe. The same awareness that allows us to love deeply also ensures that we will one day grieve deeply. Perhaps these are not separate parts of being human. Perhaps they are the same gift seen from different sides. Psychologist Rollo May believed that anxiety is not simply something to eliminate. It is woven into the experience of being alive. To care is to become vulnerable. To choose is to accept uncertainty. To live fully is to recognize that loss is always possible. Existential philosopher Søren Kierkegaard described anxiety as the price of possibility. The freedom to choose our path also means living with the knowledge that another path was left behind. Every decision opens one door while quietly closing countless others. And psychologist Carl Jung reminded us that becoming whole is not about removing the difficult parts of ourselves. It is about recognizing them, understanding them, and allowing them to exist without pretending they are not there. There may never come a day when we stop searching for meaning. The tragedy may not be that we became self-aware. The tragedy may be that once awareness appeared, there was no turning back. No way to unknow our mistakes. No way to forget that our time is limited. No way to silence questions that have no answers. Every generation inherits the same remarkable ability. We look toward the future, knowing it will eventually end. We look inward, still trying to understand ourselves. After everything we've discovered about the world, perhaps the most difficult thing we have ever tried to understand is the mind trying to understand itself. And I think that's the tragedy of self-awareness. If you enjoyed the vid, like, subscribe, and share. Stay strong and healthy. Much love.